I'm going to tell you how Doc Brandon and the ghost of the Democrats in Congress last term lives on, and it lives on to troll royally Project 2025 and all of their architects. And before I go into the details specifically on how a recent court decision plays straight into the Democrats foreshadowing an era where Donald Trump actually wins the 2024 election and is able to bring back all of his administrators from previous term who were part of the Project 2025 agenda, you should pay attention specifically to this man. His name is Russell Vought. So Russell Vought was Donald Trump's Office of Management and Budget Director during Trump term 1. During his Senate confirmation hearings to get that same position during Donald Trump's second administrative hearings, several of the senators in the Senate confirmation panel, including California Senator Alex Padilla and Virginia Senator Tim Kaine, pointedly asked and pointed out the fact that Russell Vought was caught on a hot mic, or essentially was taped, secret taping, where he had said that he had previously, or in between the two terms, written 15 executive orders for Donald Trump.
80% of my time is working on the plans of what's necessary to take control of these bureaucracies. I want to be the person that crushes the deep state. I think there's a lot of different ways to do that.
By now we know some of those executive orders were actually written by Donald Trump and implemented, and we're fighting it out now in the courts.
It is defunding it, it's impoundment, the ability to not spend money, it's getting rid of their independence.
Even as Vought talks about the so-called deep state, he claims his group is forming its own to take over on day one.
We are trying to create a shadow Office of Management and Budget, a shadow National Security Council, and a shadow Office of Legal Counsel. These are the main organs in government that you need outside to create the battle plan.
So there's this thing that says every accusation is a confession with these folks, and that's quite true because he said that. Now, they also pointed out the fact that he had gone in front of a panel at an event and said that he wanted federal workers to be traumatized. He said he wanted them to not want to go to work. He wanted them to get up and be traumatized. He wanted essentially to make their life a living hell.
We want, when they wake up in the morning, we want them to not want to go to work because they are increasingly viewed as the villains. We want their funding to be shut down so that the EPA can't do all of the rules against our energy industry because they have no bandwidth financially to do so. We want to put them in trauma.
And with a straight face, along party line votes, all of the senators voted to confirm that man, who they had already called out during his confirmation hearings.
It also strikes me, I mean, you come across as someone who thinks they know better than Congress, better than this committee, and at times even better than the president during the first Trump administration. You testified last week that you've been thinking about returning to the OMB for the last 4 years, and I can only hope and pray that, should you be confirmed, that you would uphold the Constitution above all else. My colleague, Senator Lujan, raised some of your contributions to Project 2025. And in that Project 2025, you write that the OMB director should be, quote, aggressive in wielding the tool of apportionment on behalf of the president's agenda, and, quote, defend the apportionment power against attacks from Congress. Particularly striking that there's so many members of this committee that seem eager, anxious, ready to vote for your confirmation when there's a clear disregard and disdain for Congress's appropriation authority. I have to take this opportunity to echo Senator Peters, who raised a specific concern during your hearing in the Homeland Security Committee last week, that your record is particularly concerning for disaster-impacted states, given your previous unlawful actions to politicize, withhold, and slow the distribution of disaster or even foreign aid. So My question to you is this, Mr. Vought. If confirmed, will you or will you not politicize disaster funding and deny funds provided by Congress for American families and businesses that have been devastated by natural disasters?
Senator, I would not politicize the dispersing of federal funds in any capacity. I do support and will take an oath to uphold the Constitution, and that will continue if confirmed in this capacity.
Pause here to highlight the fact that this is the point that he perjured himself because it was confirmed he has violated his oath of office and has indeed withheld funds, not just from disaster relief, but from lots of things, billions of dollars worth. And he's right now threatening to continue to do that. So this is where he committed perjury when he said he was not going to violate his oath and he was going to send out funds allocated by Congress. He tried to sidestep that whether or not he was going to try to remove the federal workforce and reclassify the majority workforce from Schedule F into some new schedule where there essentially will be loyalists, where they have to test their loyalty to Donald Trump. There was a recent study that said Americans on both sides of the aisle, conservatives and liberals, Republicans and Democrats, said they do not want their federal workforce to be included with essentially sycophants. They don't want them to be political appointees. They prefer that the expertise and the knowledge that they have developed over the course of several administrations, several years working in their jobs, they're able to cross that and keep that going for continuity, for fluidity in the government running. They don't want it to be included in so that's not even popular. Because it wasn't popular, we know that during Donald Trump's campaign, he said he had nothing to do with Project 2025. He tried to distance them, but one of the very first things he did was put and nominate Russell Vought, who was a co-author of Project 2025, to have this job that he had before. One of the very first things that Russell Vought did is he once again tried to shift all the federal civilian workforce into this new position. We know one of the first things he did was essentially start the process along with Elon Musk and firing federal workers for 54 years. It's clunky. It has duplication. It has waste. It has fraud. It has abuse. You can remove waste, fraud, and abuse if you're careful, cautious, you take a scalpel approach, you seek it out. When you identify it, you remove it. You can't just chop block. You can't just say we're going to take away anyone who was there before who we have a hunch is a leftist or is woke, because what you do is you remove the institutional memory. You remove everything that makes government work smoothly, and you just put this hobnodge of demoralized workforce. Nothing gets done. Our infrastructure. I'm going to pause once more, because one of the things I said on January 21st is that Donald Trump was going to be really aggressive in his agenda because he's a second-term president. And what that's going to do is alienate and really piss off and erode his base. The way he eroded his base over the course of 4 years during the first term, I said that he's going to accelerate his erosion of his support from his base. And here we see an example of it, that in June, this article from Washington Post says he's accelerating his push to reward loyalty in federal government, meaning scrapping non-civil service in favor of biased politicized system. And the surveys, even ones that just came out this week, says that 83% of his supporters of Donald Trump think that it should be a non-political workforce. A lot of people do not want partisan. They want non-politicized civil service because they value the expertise that comes with civilian workforce that goes across various different administrations. So this is an example of how, when I say that his policies essentially misalign quickly with his base, and there are a lot of Trump federal workers that got fired, even though they're loyal to him. So this tells you that he does not care. And then this should help in the midterms in terms of having those people not be so loyal, be willing to go and pull the lever in favor if his candidates are in favor of the Republicans that keep rewarding him. So back to Russell Vought. They put him back into office. So you want to be mindful of him because he's already promised to shut down the government if he's not able to claw back funding. Now, for those of you who don't know, that position of management director, the Office of Management Director, it is the go-between the Congress and the executive, the White House. So Congress appropriate funds, and the position where they have the ability to say, we're not going to distribute funds that were allocated from Congress. Nowhere in that. But he's done this and got caught. He did it one time. He did it when he stopped funding for Puerto Rico. and for other disaster relief in order to shift things to Donald Trump's agenda, like taking away relief funding to fund something else for Donald Trump's agenda. Totally violating the law. He got caught. They stopped him, reeled it back. There were lawsuits. It didn't work the first time. But you know what they say is that try again. Insanity is doing the same thing over again and expecting different results. So here we have it once again. And now we have a judge or filed a lawsuit because along with the ranking member of the House Appropriations Committee noticed that the Trump administration had taken offline this database that tracks funding. And we know why they did that because of everything I just said to you. Ranking member Rosa DeLaRua, ranking member meaning that she is the most senior member amongst the Democrats, the House Appropriations Committee, she did a press release on March 24th and said, what are they hiding? So she demanded they restore the access to the website detailing federal spending allocations. Now, how did this website come to exist? Remember, I mentioned to you the Democrats anticipated the possibility that Donald Trump would come back to the office, and they congressionally allocated funding. For example, Joe Biden negotiated deals with the various different trade unions because they knew during Donald Trump's first term, he tries to throw away all the trade unions, take away all the rights of the federal employees. So they scrambled to get deals, which Joe Biden, of course, wanted to. He's a union man. Get these deals done, make them ironclad. Right now, Trump is trying to take away, but because of the way that the unions negotiations and the and the contracts were drafted up during Biden's term, it's really hard for Donald Trump to do what he's trying to do. Thank you to Joe Biden. Also, Joe Biden protected all of those different foreign entities, the Haitians, the Cubans, the Nicaraguans, the Hondurans, who the United States had granted temporary protective status. In order for you to revoke the temporary protective status, you have to give a 60-day heads-up notice with, of course, reasoning for why you're revoking them. The Trump administration did not do that, and it has to have reasons. They're revoking temporary status for nations that continue to have, for example, the trauma and stress and political turmoil that's going on in their country that caused the Biden administration to give these residents of those nations temporary protective status. Those entities, those things that happen in their country continue to exist today. So for him to revoke it without any reasoning, without following the proper process of 60 days means essentially you can't do it. So that's why they've filed lawsuits. So if they win, and they should win because he didn't do the 60 days, didn't do the process, there's no reasoning other than cultural war and that they hate people of color and Donald Trump doesn't want anyone who's not white to come to the United States. That's not a reasoning. It has to be a solid reasoning. So because that, most likely or not, judges are going to block the removal of those temporary protective status and tell them you can do it, but you got to do it the proper way. That's what's coming forward down the pike, and that's why I'm disappointed in the Supreme Court essentially allowing him to carry out his agenda until the lawsuits work out, because by the time it comes back up to them, it's going to be the same result. The same thing that's happened in the district court's temporary protective statuses, the halts, when he does the preliminary injunctions or the temporary restraining orders that they try to block, that the Supreme Court stayed. Ultimately, those are going to be permanent, and they're going to be appealed, and he's going to lose an appeal, and it's going to make its way back to the Supreme Court. Shame on the Supreme Court for letting them do this, because it's just going to cause disruptions in people's lives and cause anxiety and stress, and it's needlessly unnecessary. But I digress. So back to the thing. So those are two ways that Congress essentially try to thwart the Trump administration agenda before he went into office through this. So this is a third way, knowing very well what Roosevelt did. So they added a new law. So in 2022, they passed what's called the Consolidated Appropriations Act, which requires there to be a creation of a public apportionments database. In 2023, they reallocated and reauthorized this database and said it should be automated, meaning every single time Congress decides to spend money or take money away, within 2 days, they have to update it with the documents. And there's organizations like the Center for Responsible and Ethical Washington, CREW, they monitor this. They are a public watchdog group. mean to be a public watchdog groups. On behalf of the public, they're making sure that the government is operating efficiently, operating without corruption, spending our tax dollars accordingly, and there's no corruption. There's no funny business. So the thing about the government is that it's government, they say sunshine is the best disinfectant. So what's done in the dark will be seen in the light. So sunshine is make everything available, transparency. If you want to be private, go to a private sector. So when Crew first drew Judge Emmett Sullivan on the case, he accordingly noted that the Trump administration offered no legitimate reason for pulling the database off. He says the purpose of the database allow groups, watchdog groups, to use the information. It's part of Congress's goal to provide increased transparency into the executive branch's appropriation decisions. Because we know what Russell Vought did the first time, the Democrats controlled Congress in a bipartisan bill along with Joe Biden, created this law to make sure we can monitor the extent to which the Russell Vought and the Project 2025 and that agenda was usurping their authority of Congress and taking back already allocated funds. A lot of the lawsuits are because the Trump administration blocking funds. I did a recent video. If you're new here, I'm JJ Legal. I help people understand the various different lawsuits filed in the Trump administration and to get some sense of calm, knowing that the courts are working. If you see MAGA talk bad about the judges, it's because they don't know what the hell they're talking about. They're a cult, and to the extent that they want the Trump administration to continue to violate the law and do whatever they want, and they don't want to be held back by judges. And J.D. Vance, shame on him because he's a lawyer, he's a Yale graduate, knows that judiciary Article 3 judges, their job essentially, and I've said before in previous video, is to interpret to the extent to which the executive or the Congress, the other two branches, or anyone along any layer of the government, the federal, state, or the local, violate the Constitution, violate statutory law, violate jurisprudence, that they bring them in. That's their job to do that. Seems they're demonizing these people for doing their job. During their job, they determine that every single thing the Trump administration is doing is unlawful, violating the law, all of the Constitution, First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, 10th Amendment, 11th Amendment, 14th Amendment, 8th Amendment, just violating the laws up and down. The Administrative Procedure Act, ultraviolence, balance of power, separation of powers, every single law they break. Every single process or procedure they do not follow. So because they're not following the law, the judges, as their job is to say, you're not following the law. And now they're demonizing the judges for doing their job and pointing out the extent that the Trump administration is not following the law. So if you see any MAGAs say anything about the judges, just block and remove them. That's what I do. Anyway, so the judge said, no, we're going to put back the database. Of course, the Trump administration, what they do is they appeal. They appeal to the Court of Appeals, to which the Court of Appeals says, no, put back the database. And they still didn't put back the database. So the plaintiffs had to go back to the judge and say, Your Honor, these people still didn't put back the database. So the judge was like, you know what? Here's what I'm going to do. Not only got to put it back, you have to restore it immediately. You got to republish all the documents, historical things that were removed. You have to maintain accessibility as mandated by the 2022 and the 2023 transparency statutes. And you're prohibited from removing that database or any apportionment records unless legally authorized. Until we change the law, you got to do this. As of today, I looked, the database is still not back. They went and appealed. And he said, you appealed to the Court of Appeals before. And they said no. The court has already considered and rejected defendants' arguments. Defendants cannot suffer harm from an injunction that merely ends in a lawful. So they're saying we are suffering. We're suffering because they're forcing us to follow the law. That is what you're arguing. You're going to the court saying the harm we're going to suffer is they're going to force us to follow the law. We don't want to follow it. Does that make sense? That's what the judge is like. That just makes absolutely no sense. Put that damn database back. So of course they're appealing this because they're a piece of shit administration. But you should know this, that this is an example of Joe Biden before he left, anticipating that perhaps his predecessor or his successor will lose, and Trump may find his little greasy Epstein files having child pedo self back in the office. and he put in this place this thing. So yeah, that's the efforts to stop Russell Vote. In the meantime, I think you should call your senators, call your representatives. When the Democrats retake the House and the Senate, one of the first things they need to do is, in addition to, they can't get rid of, they can get rid of Donald Trump. When they get rid of Donald Trump, they get rid of Stephen Miller. They need to impeach Russell Vote. That's the next thing. They're going to repeat. He violated his oath of office. All the stuff he's doing, he's not supposed to be doing. He overreaches his authority and his power time and time again. And now he's talking about withholding funds and causing a government shutdown. Nobody elected you. Nobody elected you. All right. All right, you got your marching orders. I hope that's helpful for you. I hope that gives you a sense of, I don't know if it gives you a sense of calm. At least you let you know that people are watching and people are fighting back. And the judiciary and the judges are like, no, you can't do this. Like I said before, America took 250 something years to build. It's clunky. There's waste, there's fraud, there's abuse. Yeah, no one's doubting that. The Democrats do a lot of stuff that's crazy. The Republicans do a lot of stuff that's crazy. Republicans do a lot of racist, super crazy stuff. But at the end of the day, one of the ways we make sure the government continues to run smoothly is we have processes and procedures. And he violates the processes and procedures because they don't follow them. And they're not following them because they don't want to. They're lazy. They just want to legislate on culture wars and vibes and things like that and disregard all of the things they need to do. And it slows them down. That's why they have this shock and awe agenda. But it's just as fast as they put these orders, just as fast as he does these executive orders, we're going to be challenging them and we're going to meet them in the courts. And the courts are going to be batting them down time and time again. I always say donate to your local nonprofits and organizations that are looking out for you, that are filing these lawsuits, that are challenging these executive orders, that are slowing down the agenda because ACLU, Crew, Democracy Forward, Democracy Docket, the Center for Biodiversity, the Friends of the Everglades, all these nonprofits that I mentioned that are filing these lawsuits on behalf of immigrants, on behalf of the public, on behalf of federal workers, on behalf of the American people are doing the job, and they are helping. They're looking out for you. They're slowing down the agenda. Anyway, I'm JJ Legal, so if you want to support me, go to jjlegal.com. You can get my Know Your Rights docket, my case tracker. You can join my private communities, watch my videos, but most important thing, share this video, subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. Each one teach one.